I love rap, but I'm a true feminist. So if I shake my bits, you know whose they is. Won't catch you bumping around like Iggy is a lyricist. Getting fingered on the clip, pre-packed rap fans, broken image. Feel it up on stage, you get away with it. Does the industry have no respect for women? They will chick when I'm through with it. Be that, be this, big ass, big tits, tiny waist, tone tips. Don't be a pig when you eat, but don't take his if you're feminine. So redefine a definition. It's whatever you imagine, just have a vision. Nothing inherent to the female condition, so don't be afraid to say shut the fuck up and listen. I'm a big bitch now. Wait, let's get this down. Wait, let's get this down. Wait, let's get this down. We big bitches now, we don't bow down, don't cower, boy, it's our finest hour. I teach you how to love without dominion or power, bow down.
Excuse me, you don't have a check for 250s.
I'm glad you didn't ask me what is a poem, because that's really hard. Yeah, I find it really difficult to describe a poem.
The main reason I write poetry, I suppose, is I think it's interesting, and one of the best things about it is it's the opportunity to express what is potentially the inexpressible.
When I was 8 years old, I started writing a lot of poetry. I was quite a shy child, so it was a good way to communicate. Even if it's just communicating with a book, the book that you're writing in, it was a good way of coming to terms with your feelings, daily life.
Why do I write poetry? It's interesting because my background is in writing for video and film, really, and I've also written for radio. But recently, I don't know, I thought my work was somewhat poetic.
I think poetry needs to be more of a dialogue between the writer and the reader.
A lot of my work is trying to look at people, look at how people live, how I live.
So I'm very much interested in the underdog, very much interested in people like who don't have a voice, and trying to give them voices.
It's a challenge writing about, responding to current affairs in a way that lets other voices in to the poem.
I've always written since I was a kid. There was no right or wrong answer with poetry or English. I hated maths. I used to do English homework in my maths class. Trying to work the formula of the world out was a lot easier than algebra. So that was my first kind of inception of writing poetry.
I think just started talking about how did we actually start writing raps together? How did that happen?
I don't know, because we'd always been writing individually, and I'd done a few open mic events, established a bit of a name for myself among, me and one other person, for doing just. I was the world's most famous sit-down comedian for a period of about 2 weeks. Where I would go to the front of open mic nights and take my chair with me, and no one else took their chair with them, so I thought I'm onto something here.
Some of my poetry is quite biographical, I would say.
I sometimes find I write a lot about love and relationships and interactions.
Poetry has to connect with people, full stop, really. I'm insulted in this day and age reading about, reading poems about, or books being published about, how tender the steak was in a Mayfair restaurant. I couldn't give a toss about that, and a lot of people couldn't give a toss about that are going through, some very difficult experiences. Who gives a shit about that? I don't.
More recently, being estranged from my granddaughter, who I love, has become a real spur for me to write, to try to express how I feel as a grandfather being cut off from this child.
I've been writing raps for a bit, but not really done it in front of many people. I think I was probably still quite scared to. I think we just sort of both had that moment where we were like, fuck it, if we don't do it now, probably never will.
Because I was really unsure what I wanted to do, but then when we had this idea, the first time I tried something over music and it clicked, that was the kind of like epiphany moment for me, I remember the first thing I did was I wrote like a 16 and I rapped that over a Tangerine Dream track. And then as soon as that gelled, I was like, oh, this is actually a really phenomenal feeling.
Yeah, no one's really in it for the money. I think there's a public expectation or assumption that people are in it for the money, but ultimately I suppose they're in it for the art or the craft.
I ask myself, well, what do I do it for? I'm not making any money out of it. I'm not making any bacon or cheese. It doesn't help me pay the bills, yeah? But I like doing it because it's entertaining. I haven't made any money out of it, but it's a great release to actually make new friends and experience new things and talk about life and their jobs or their experiences with their families and their friends, and it's a great social scheme of things. I met a hell of a lot of nice, decent people.
Sometimes you kind of think, is it worth having a creative degree? You know, what do you get from it? What's the output? Because there's not many careers as poets nowadays, is there?
Artists should be paid.
Since 2004 I've made my living as a poet, which involves doing creative writing workshops with various groups, commissions, editing publications, as well as being quite proactive in selling your books.
How she wrote your name. First with a sparkler, a flick of the wrist, in the dark back gardens of November. Once more with a bare heel, curving the sand at Robin Hood's Bay, where ringed plovers passed. A 4-inch brush ahead of the roller, magenta on a virgin bedroom wall. Her first show in a white cube gallery, the crackle and buzz of luminous tubes, a click of a switch, your name in neon, light waves of love flooding the room.
Historically, all of the poets well remembered are males, and that's annoying in a way because you have to kind of go out of your way to research the women. You're kind of shuffling through all of the men, thinking, where are the women? Where are the women?
16th century poetry, has it had its day in some respects? What does that say to somebody who listens to Eminem, or somebody who's just lost, dad who's just lost their job, or somebody who's just come back from Afghanistan or whatever, or migrants? It has to connect with people who are reading it, because the first impression, as they say, lasts. And if it's a man in tights and 18th, 16th century kind of attire, talking about kings and queens or whatever, it's not really a good start for students today, I don't think.
It makes complete sense to me that people, whatever their class or their background, decide to self-start. So much of what we do, I think, as a culture, maybe it's more of a British thing and linked in with that sense of tradition and self-loathing, but so much of our culture is waiting to ask for permission to do things.
I think there are some things that have quite a specific starting point. There's a piece I think that I worked on that had like a particular quote from a documentary that kind of sparked it off, that was a Louis Theroux documentary and a woman who had worked with addicts talking about, and the sort of the quote that we sampled was something along the lines of, men know who their enemies are and who want to hurt them. Women tend to be abused by those who say I love you, and that's really crazy making. And that kind of whole piece stemmed from that idea of that kind of cyclical abuse, and as individuals and as a society as a whole, of regardless of kind of gender, of standing up and sort of saying we won't be infantilised anymore. I'm a big girl, I'm a big boy, and I'll do what I want, kind of thing.
Big bitches.
Big bitches.
More like mustard in the valley across. We'll harvest and bloom by the Weight Watchers dog. There is too much and too much and too much of God.
Live performance is plays a big part in my art, in what I do, in what I really like to do. So it's the contact with the audience that is important in my work.
Since I graduated, I've been writing like scripts and performing a lot of poetry, but also kind of involving the things that I'm really interested in with performance art, such as kind of like building sets to house these performances, props and installations. So I'm quite interested in the crossovers between theatre, performance poetry, and performance art, and then things like intermediality in theatre.
It's funny because I'm talking about poetry as performance as opposed to poetry about written down. Again, because it speaks to how I think about it. I think about it as performance, which I'm trying to get more stuff published at the moment, so I might have to start thinking about it in another way.
But it's interesting because I do prefer, in terms of music, I prefer to hear a male voice.
Britannia rules the fucking waves, now we're drilling down. Shale gas, the smelling salt, revive her Madge's pound. See what they'll do, they'll drill in here, 300 metres down. Inject a scrum of chemicals, enough water for a town, then out it comes, a lovely gas, it's nature's pheromone. To laptops, kettles, smoothie makers, TVs and iPhones, you beardy weirdies. Socks with Crocs. Chillax now, Gandalf. You're lost. There's more than banjos now for plucking, cracking gums, brittle foreskin, pissing on the vegan grill with acid rain. Drill, baby, drill. It's a drill, baby, drill bill. The stink of the thrill bill with ancient woodland for hacking. Grab my axe, timber, frackin', frackin', belly full to gain. This is what it tastes like, kids. The necessary pain of arsenic and radium and benzene in tap water. Regulation spores the funds of your Magna Carta. We'll stick money in an offshore bank, these noble pioneers. California drilled the best drought for 1,000 years, and Blackpool's having earthquakes because the ground is soup beneath them. You can't drink money makers profiteering bunkum, so drill, baby, drill, baby, drill, baby, drill. The earth will racked and scabbed now by your shrewdness and your skill. By partisan, the champagne flutes they often overspill, till the folk drink poison Whitehall water. Drill, baby, drill.
What was really exciting about spoken word was that it was a shared experience with the audience and the performer, where everyone is imagining the same images in their heads and having a shared emotional experience as well.
So it's not just about writing the poetry, it's about feeling the poetry.
He asks, "Can I hold your hand?" She says, "Can I kiss your lips?" He says, "Can I hold you?" She asks, "Can I touch you?" Whispering, "Do you want it?" He murmurs, "Can we fuck?" Consent is sexy. Consent is necessary. Ask and don't just guess. The absence of a no is not a yes.
Thank you. The thrill of performance, you're standing in front of a crowd and your heart's going and your body's reacting. So you have that side of it. And also, like, if just little noises a crowd can make back. Like if you've thrown in a clever line and someone goes, "Oh," or or say a laugh or a gasp or something like that. And that just really sort of, thrills you, gives you sort of like your heart a little jolt when you go, they get it.
I love going into different environments and performing my poetry. I like the idea that I enjoy performing poetry where you wouldn't expect to hear poetry.
Holloway. It's the sudden bellows through silence, gestures like fireworks, the twisted smile that can't find the confidence of a crescent. These are the things that shout, "Run, run with me. Throw off this cobweb prison of the present, and let's run away to the green woods of our childhoods, dig with sticks in the leaf-loamy earth, searching for pirate gold."
So I have this fantasy that one day I'll be performing poetry in a chip shop.
I've got a poetry in the region, basically, come about by my wife's death. I tried to write her a book, and I went to Central Library. They directed me to the Belgrade, and from the Belgrade I went to the BBC as a trainee writer with Joe Roberts. A friend of mine, Kieran, got me in contact with Fire and Dust, and I then proceeded to do performances on poetry. Open your eyes and see the unwritten book of our history. Everything is ordained to us when we reach the final path of knowing, of the unknowable, the whistle and change of uncertainty. Everything is revealed. Nothing is known for sure. Only the outcome. That's it.
It would be a real win if there were 100 people in the room and 5 of them had not really given poetry a chance since school, or since that disillusionment with it.
A poem, even though it can be read the same from the page, it can be performed so many different ways. You can perform it in a certain rhythm.
In spite of the inevitability that the more she spent from sunrise to sun, the bigger, the deeper, the darker, the... But carefully she conducted her research via the internet. If the husband sought to seek the truth about her spending, there'd be more than a few moans and groans, since his signature Kate was forging to obtain ridiculous loans. Well, thank you, madam. Here's your receipt. Would you like an extended warranty to cover your web of deceit?
You can perform it slowly.
Thump, crack, following sheaves of light. We scratch away a day's shadow and wore out the safety of the night.
You can perform half of it and have another person come and perform half of it with you.
Little mice murdering another rhyme scheme. When we kill a beat, it becomes a crime scene. I'm like Raycon singing ice cream, so don't tell me to keep it down or I might scream. I'm fly than a spitfire, make the mic steam. Spit the kind of shit that will never wipe clean. Yeah, I'm so high that I need a flight team. Smoking since my teens, quitting is a pipe dream. Turn on, tune in, drop back. Turn that girl into a dirty stopper. This could be a one-hit wonder.
Like an instant knockout.
Knockout.
Rock out with your cock out.
Cock out.
Cover up a cop out.
Cop out.
If you ain't in this clique, bitch, tits, so get the fuck out.
I really like playing with languages, so playing with Polish and English. For instance, if I was to write about something that is very close to me, that I want to create a fairly close and intimate relationship with, I would probably use Polish. I use English if I try to express mockery or sarcasm, or generally if I want to reach out the wider audience, I suppose.
And it depends on, I think, the environment that you perform the poems in as well. One of my last performances was in a hall that had a coconut being hammered in the background, and it kind of added to the performance. The environment that you perform the poetry in changes how you perform the poetry.
In Coventry, a lot of gigs that are happening, I would say there's more men than women. But I'm not entirely sure why that is.
Going to a poetry night, you tend to see lots of male poets, middle-aged male poets, and it's so refreshing to hear a woman at these events. I mean, any woman, it doesn't matter what poetry she's reading or how long she's been writing for. It's just nice to hear a woman's voice.
Sunday morning. Come lie with me again, exactly as we were that morning. We made love twice, and you said I was infinite. After, I listened to the rain falling against the patio, the call of the birds, and your breath, now gentle. It was the most beautiful song. When I was at university, I started to realise that writing did play quite an important role in my performance work.
I'll go to poetry nights and I'll hear other people talk about large themes and things like that, and I think, why don't I write poetry about that?
Protest about squatting, about alternative lifestyle, and road protesting.
Why do I write war poetry, I suppose? Because I don't know anybody really who's doing it. There's a handful of people writing war poetry at the moment. I'm disgusted in the times that I live in.
What inspires me is varied. In my book Journeying, which I read from, what very much inspired me there was post-colonial issues.
I am writing things that also explores issues about boundaries, migration, immigration, control, wildlife, what's wild, what's free.
I suppose at the moment I'm most interested in ideas around public space, the mental states of being in a certain place at a certain time. And so you could extend that into like the metaphor of Coventry and potentially even the ring road. So within that, literally that concrete space, how are your mental states and your impressions of the world affected, changed, altered?
But basically, it's sort of like spiritual things. Things I feel, things I see, things I hear on record or watch on TV or listen to the radio, areas like that. Some of them are based on life experiences with other people that surround me, or people that I meet, places that I go.
I find it actually a lot with female poets, and you listen to female poets rather than male poets at poetry nights, that they tend to write more about the personal, and men like to be funny or political or loud, and I say it makes me wonder why, and then I try and write those poems and I find that I can't. But I try and stretch myself every now and again to write something a bit bigger.
The personal is the political, and the political is the personal. So whilst there's a common distaste and mistrust, if you like, around people writing about social issues, if you like, is that you can't help but write what's going on around you.
For a writer, actually, you think about how many writers really take off in their writing career in their 40s, it's loads. I've heard of loads of female poets that have. I think if you've got a bit of life experience, you can write about more. You've got more to say.
I've done lots of things.
And as your experience of life continues and potentially deepens, that gives you more to do with, I suppose.
Above whirring wheels, I cling to my window outlook, wanting to push into ultra-mundane regions, molded from twisted ravines, far from the call to arms.
The way that you respond to current affairs and the media is very personal. It's like your own response and thoughts and ideas, you know, your own politics and values and the things that you're interested in.
Tabloids sensationalise, they don't memorialise these experiences, and I think poetry does. I think it's the purest kind of art form, along with art, photography. Like McCullen's war photography was very inspiring.
Oh, I think of poetry as a great release for most people on the social scheme, and also a multifaceted sort of a political scheme of things in life in general. People actually allow themselves to put over different worldviews of how they feel either in this country or in Europe or Eastern Europe, maybe in China and Japan, you know. So it actually escalates and it branches out and it keeps people well informed with what they feel is the ultimate, what's going on in their life situation, life circumstances.
Her first son was silent, as if refusing to weep from that beautiful slum. The still yellow flower of Nagasaki took 9 months to bloom. Her first kiss was black rain, writing tragic symphonies on song sheet glass. Her brother is the boogeyman, haunted by his face from slithers. Her first period was jelly. The shift mother came trained to hold survivors. Do not say a word to the handsome doctor who writes for your blood. Her first revolution was spinning a potter's wheel anti-clockwise, reshaping her family with Nagasaki clay. She said, "This is how water should feel."
I write about all sorts of things. I've kind of, emotional stuff, stories, ideas, politics, anything really. I'm trying to sort of write more often these days, so I'm writing more about current affairs as well, which is an interesting challenge because that can be quite didactic and that's not good.
Certain of my poems are about my experience maybe as a woman. Even in the 21st century, I've written poems about feminism, about consent. So those poems, I would say, definitely have a political edge, although they are written from a personal standpoint.
We often get told it's quite political, sometimes quite sexual. Yeah, a lot of people will say it's quite political. I don't think we intentionally go in to be political. Maybe just...
It's more the spirit of it than the actual... I think more than us explicitly saying, this is what I feel about these issues today. Some people just feel that it's by its nature
Someone
political,
described it
whatever
as
that means.
anarchic rap.
I think I would say I'm inspired by other people, other artists. So the kind of things they write about, or the ways in which they do it, I'm sometimes I'm deeply impressed with the style or the artfulness of it, or simply won over by what they're saying.
But writing about your own experience is quite direct. It's personal as well.
I only seem to be able to write poetry from personal experience.
I've been homeless myself. I've write from a perspective of life hasn't always been particularly easy.
And I do a lot of outreach work as well. I've just started working with in a residential home with dementia patients, so I'm going to try a bit of poetry there as well.
It's kind of poetry that tries to steal itself from anywhere, the mundane, so taking conversations from overhearing people, a woman that's coming from the market that say she's just brought, 5 tomatoes. There we go, we have a line, 5 tomatoes.
I found bits and pieces that I used and longed for, and one was about the bus trip home.
I've got one where I write about what it was like when I was growing up, based on these conversations with my mum, where she would list all the addresses that we lived at between me being born and me turning 16, and just reeling off these road names and house numbers, and just saying about all these different houses we lived at and why we moved and how often.
I'm interested in making notes when I'm doing ordinary things. When I'm going to and from work to the train station, when I'm going shopping, I will always have my notebook with me. And it's catching snippets of the world that I live in that I'm interested in. I don't necessarily want to make sense of it or necessarily understand it.
I must say that a lot of my writing is influenced by my Polish background, because my education started with a lot of it was looking at Polish writers and poets. I mean, when I was younger, I was reading a lot of Adam Mickiewicz and Wisława Szymborska, and I was really interested in the wordplay. How much you can play with words in order to express yourself.
I don't think we have any limits of what we would or wouldn't write about, and it will very much vary depending on either something will catch our eye. Sometimes we'll sit down with an idea or something that we want to kind of explore, but usually it's a bit more of a sort of free association kind of thing, or something might have just pissed us off and we might have just one line and then everything will just come from that.
Being older, you've got more space for reflection, and your opinions do change, whether you thought they would or not, so that all goes in.
When I come to write about things like that, I personally think, well, how valid is my opinion? And I suppose it's self-doubt, which all writers will suffer from, I'm sure.
I went to visit a friend yesterday, so the last thing I wrote about was yesterday afternoon, actually, after I'd visited my friend. She's got very young babies, and my daughter's 7 now, and it really took me back, to the time when my daughter was a baby, and how hard it is and how isolating it is to be a parent looking after a small child.
I think that everybody's experience has weight.
And we represent views of people that are often
Disenfranchised.
And I'm collaborating with someone at the moment on a new project, and it's about the prejudice of mental health issues and projections that people send on to anyone who, like in my family, my father's schizophrenic and my sister's schizophrenic, and I don't have a mental illness, but when people find out about that, they project all sorts of things onto me, and the effect of other people's behaviour towards me, that it's been difficult in my life, and also so I'm writing about that.
In the back room is a broken frame of a piano, the black and white keys still intact. But the lecky meter, still there. The water pipe looks okay, because you can survive without electricity or gas, but you've got to have water.
I think the personal can be political, but the political isn't necessarily personal, I suppose.
I think a lot of people read the general kind of energy that's being put across, or the sort of attitude that's coming out, and you can usually get in the gist of what we're sort of trying to get at through that.
I'm a middle-class white woman, so maybe my poetry isn't as political in a lot of respects than some others. So I suppose as a woman that I do write, but then again, say the personas for poetry, not all of my poems are written as myself.
But the nice line about poetry is that it's one hand or one thought, if you like, reaching out to another and finding something in common. So you can reach out and touch someone who won't have had the exact same experiences or background or anything like that you have had, but you still find some kind of common ground. And that sense of connection, I think, is really valuable.
Art is feared by governmental systems. Art is prostituted sometimes to promote wars, like propaganda in World War I and World War II. So artists must have a social conscience.
It's no longer just making something that's predictable that you already understand. It is going in a direction that you are not entirely in control of.
I think the main thing for me is I want to express my own skewed, fucked up perceptions of the world, whatever that might be worth.
And I think that makes creativity. And it's the creativity bit, I suppose, that inspires me, and trying to get hold of that entity. So it's something I'm in control of, something I need to do that I'm obsessed by, but it also needs to take me into an area that is unpredictable.
We have to say that I was here and I cared.
Wordsworth said something like, poetry is an intensity of emotions recollected in a moment of tranquility.